With the recent special program, we're introduced with the new banners in Yunli and Jiaoqiu. On top of that is the insane collab announcement with Fate. Like, holy cow, can you believe that? But in today's video, I'll be breaking down the new banners based on what's shown from the livestream and hopefully help you decide who to pull for. Now then, let's start. The first character we have is Yunli, which is a 5-star physical destruction path character, exactly the same as Clara that we have. To summarize her role as well, you can think of her as another version of Clara. They both utilize counterattacks for their damage output. And let's take a look at her kit. Her basic is a pretty normal single target hit. Her skill, however, allows her to restore her HP for starters. For the looks of things though, it's not that big of a heal, but it does suit the survivability factor of a character from the Path of Destruction. On top of that, she'll attack the target and adjacent enemies as well. Pretty standard destruction skill, right? Her talent here is her bread and butter, which allows her to counterattack if she herself is attacked. This is exactly the same as Clara's counterattack, except Yunli's counterattack will attack one target and adjacent targets as well. In exchange though, of course, the damage is lower on a singular target compared to Clara since it's spread out, right? As for Yunli's ultimate, it's important to first take note that Yunli has an out-charging mechanic like Argenti does as well. If you take a look at her icon, she has an outer ring on her ult icon that will charge up if she already has full energy to begin with. However, Yunli does not gain any special effects at all from saving the energy all the way up to the maximum. It simply exists to prevent Yunli's energy from being overcapped and wasted. So feel free to use it whenever, don't have to save it all the way. After using her ultimate, she'll go into a parry state, which reduces her damage taken. This is very similar to Clara's ultimate. On top of that, Yunli will taunt all enemies. This is exactly like what Fire MC does for her skill. At the same time as well, she'll enhance her next counterattack through her talent. This enhanced counterattack simply does more damage and more instance of damage as well. Again, very similar to Clara. And moving on, we have her technique, which is one of the rarest ones we've seen. Yunli will instantly use her enhanced counterattack on a random enemy as you enter the battle. This will work whether if you attack or get attacked by enemies. And from all of that information, we can extrapolate that Yunli's playstyle is a simple cycle of being attacked a bunch, using her ultimate, and being attacked a bunch again. It sounds exactly like Clara, but there are some definitive differences like how Yunli taunts all enemies, making her a valuable asset even in terms of sustaining and redirecting damage away from allies. The cornerstone of her damage will be based on the amount of times enhanced counterattacks are used, meaning to say you'll have to pair her with energy supports like say Huohuo or extra turn characters that help Yunli gain actions and energy. By doing so, Yunli will get more energy and more ultimate, in turn doing more enhanced counterattack, and that is how you play Yunli. Just so happens as well, Huohuo and Sparkle are both the rerun banners, so yeah, Huohuo knows exactly what they're doing, man. And moving on, we have a list of pros and cons. Yunli is certainly just a well-rounded DPS that can do everything. Multi-target, single target damage, and even healing. I actually suggest going for it if you need a DPS that is usable in every mode in the game. If she has a con at all, it would be that she is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Although you can use her everywhere in any mode as the DPS, you won't be able to get that big, pleasing Firefly numbers every turn, and you won't be able to be unkillable like a Fushuan would be. But Yunli herself can do some things both these characters cannot. So to answer the question, should you pull Yunli? It is always the same answer where you should prioritize 2 sustains, then 2 supports, and then consider the DPS. In which case, if you're missing a DPS, I'd actually suggest going for Yunli for just how versatile she can be at doing everything. Only by building one DPS in Yunli alone, pair with any supports that you have, she will still function fine. But if you have all the roles above, I'd say, well, pull her if you love her as usual. I heckin' love her and her sockless feet. And you can too. Well, weirdness aside, we are greeted with the next new character in Jiaoqiu. He is a 5-star fire nihility character, and to summarize what he does, Jiaoqiu is a damage increase debuffer and a dot character. Think of him as a really strong version of Grey Knife that we have. And let's start with his talent first actually, because this is the big one. When Jiaoqiu attacks with basic skill or ultimate, there's a set chance to inflict 1 stack of Ashen Rose debuff on the enemies. The Ashen Rose debuff is basically a burn dot that also increases damage received by enemies. And with this talent, Jiaoqiu has his basic that hits one enemy, his skill that hits an enemy and adjacent targets, along with his ultimate that hits all enemies. And that way you can see a really simple playstyle of him just needing to land the Ashen Rose debuff as much as he can. But that's not all that he does though. Jiaoqiu's ultimate has 2 additional effects. Firstly, Jiaoqiu activates his domain expansion. Hey, I'm not joking, he literally gets a domain up, although it turns everything into a hot pot. Within this domain, enemies will take increased ultimate damage and has a chance of each being inflicted with with 1 stack of Ashen Rose debuff every time each target take action. That is the first effect, and the other effect that this ultimate has is that all enemies' Ashen Rose stacks will be set to the highest number that is present on the enemies. And if you remember, Ashen Rose is a debuff that increases damage received on enemies, so the higher the stack, the higher the effect goes. This will be very good to amplify damage dealt to all enemies. Moving on though, we have his technique, which is a simple AoE attack with a chance to land 1 stack of Ashen Rose. And with all that said, it is obvious as daylight that Jiaoqiu is designed to be one of the best supports for gosh dang Acheron. Like, of all the people, man, that decided Acheron needs more support. Like, what? Jokes aside though, Jiaoqiu's ability to continuously land Ashen Rose and buff ult damage as well are all perfect complements with especially Acheron's kit. This allows Acheron to use her ult even more times, especially against multiple enemies where each will get inflicted with Ashen Rose much more. However though, if it's just against a singular boss, Jiaoqiu's debuffing abilities will not be too much higher than say a Silver Wolf, since there are no extra mobs to land Ashen Rose die. Only if we know the numbers will we know if Jiaoqiu's debuff has better numbers than say any other damage increasing debuff sources. And with that comes the pros and the cons. Jiaoqiu is incredibly versatile since no team in the world hates increased damage dealt on enemies, right? All of them prefer that. His cons, however, is that if you have a free Pella, there isn't really a big need for Jiaoqiu, which moves us towards the question, should you be pulling Jiaoqiu? The usual consideration of 2 sustains, 2 supports, and then DPS will tell you that if you're lacking supports, Jiaoqiu is a decent pickup. He allows your team to deal more damage and has fire dots himself, which contributes to some damage output. He will also be very strong paired with someone like Acheron, but in the end though, if you own a Pella, you can still just use Pella instead and do fine. Therefore, Jiaoqiu's value will only be determined based on his numbers when it is released. But I can't foresee him just outright having like 100% damage increase, right? So it's likely that Jiaoqiu won't be meta changing like say Ranmei. To conclude, you should choose if you like to bank on a better future character or a very solid versatile debuffer in Jiaoqiu. And with that said, we close on the newer banners. But we do still have the sweet rerun banners in Huohuo and Sparkle, man. 2 of the strongest in their roles. And yeah, at this point, I'm used to being milk, man. And holy crap, that sounded weird. So yeah, should you pull Huohuo, you ask? The answer is pretty simple. If you don't own 2 good sustains, without a doubt, you should be getting Huohuo. She's the best debuff cleanser in the game, where she basically makes you untouchable with debuffs. Her healing is decent, and on top of that is the energy regeneration that helps nearly every characters. If you like 2 sustain, I swear on my life, Huohuo will do your account good as the go-to sustain in any game modes. Always remember, if you're dead, you can't win. As for the other rerun banner in Sparkle though, this one's honestly the really challenging one. Sparkle is the best action advance and skill point support in the game. Even in a team that doesn't perfectly utilizes her buffs, just with her action advancing and skill point generation makes your experience that much easier. Going with a standard rule of 2 sustains, 2 supports, and then DPS though, Sparkle can definitely fit as your go-to support character if you're lacking one. She's incredibly versatile since, like it or not, she'll provide you with some value, whether it be more skill points or more action advancement. The toughest question though would be that who do you even pull out of the 4 banners, right? And in my opinion, the party should always go to sustain. If you're missing one, go ahead and get Huohuo. Only then you should consider the 2 supports that we have in Sparkle or Jiaoqiu. Honestly, to compare both of them, it's kind of hard because they're so different, right? But the one thing they do have in common is that they are very versatile and just overall help you do more damage one way or the other. So in the end, it'll depend on who you have in your account to pair them with. If you're a Dill main and you don't have Sparkle, then I would definitely go for Sparkle over Jiaoqiu. However, if you do have Acheron and not quite the perfect supports for her, Jiaoqiu is your man. And only lastly, you would consider a damage dealer like Yunli. Since if you pull her without good sustains or supports, well, everyone dies. But ultimately though, pull for who you love most. The game can be beaten with mostly free characters anyway, so follow your heart, guys. And that will be all for today. I hope I helped you out, and take care.